Welcome to the first episode of Series 18, everyone. We have been excited to get this game covered ever since we started planning for this podcast, and now it's finally here. That's right, we are covering Descent into Midnight, and we are really excited to dive in deep on this one. Ryan, no. Nope.
It's there. It's recorded.
But first, some announcements.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, if you missed our previous announcement, make sure you check out our panel at GenCon, because not only will we be there with James D'Amato, but also one Grant Howitt as we explore our Spire characters a bit more together. It's going to be a really fun time, so come join us and say hi, and there are plenty of tickets still available.
Another great event we'd love to see you at is the System Mastery quiz show, Quiztem Mastery. I am pairing up with Jim McClure, and Ryan is joined by Victoria Rogers. And a third team has been established with James D'Amato and Aaron Catano-Saez. Oddly enough, all previous guests we've had on Character Evolution Cast episodes.
Coincidence? Probably.
Yeah, absolutely. Total coincidence, but still.
It's cool. And I am still waiting for my Chimera Games to post, maybe next week. I don't know. When they do go live, there'll be 5 spots available in each game, so keep an eye out. I can guarantee a truly unique experience, so it'd be really great to see some of you there.
Next up, review time.
Review time.
If you want your review read on air, you just need to leave us one. You can leave reviews on Apple Podcasts. Those are probably the most helpful for sure, since that's where most people get their podcasts and look at reviews. And in that case, it does help us show up earlier in the page when you're searching for things. But you can also leave them on Facebook, Podchaser, Stitcher, Facebook. Did I say Facebook twice? I don't know.
You did.
It doesn't matter. Leave us 2 reviews. This one comes from my good friend Chris, aka Iolo, from the United States on iTunes, and it is titled, Oops, All Character Creation. Ever get tired of all of the playing of games and actual plays? Miss the early honeymoon period of meeting new characters to love? Well, do I have the podcast for you. Tune into what one listener, me, refers to as the speed dating of actual play podcasts to meet a constant rotation of new characters made by fun people and even learn about some cool games in the process, but mostly the constant stream of new character energy thing. Slaps Hood. This baby can hold so many characters. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks,
I laughed
Chris.
so hard when I read this, and then I also cried a little bit.
Oh, that's awesome.
Chris, you're wonderful. Everyone listening, go check out the game Chris is working on called Hard Space Hustle. If you want to learn about the game design and playtesting process, he has a podcast called Playtest, where he is actively testing and changing the game that he's making and recording all of that. Cool. Yeah, it's really neat. So you can go check out Chris's podcast and his game as well. And also just listen to our show and leave us a review.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. With all that out of the way, please enjoy the episode.
Welcome to Character Creation Cast, a show where we discuss and create characters, the best part of role-playing games, with guests using their favorite systems. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan, and this episode, my co-host Amelia and I are thrilled to welcome Richard Kreutz-Landry and Taylor LaBresh, designers of Descent into Midnight, the game we've been wanting to cover since the beginning of this podcast.
Welcome to Character Creation Cast. I'm so excited that you're here. I've been seriously this was first on our list. I mean, a year and a half ago.
Hell yeah.
All right, let's start by introducing all of you to our audience. Richard, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and any other projects that you are currently involved in?
Sure. I'm Richard Kreutz-Landry. I am a software developer by day who writes educational math puzzles for kids. And in my not so copious spare time, I do origami art, and I am working with Rich and Taylor on Descent into Midnight.
And what about you, Taylor? What kind of stuff are you up to, and who are you?
My day job is not glamorous, and I actually hate it. So I'm not going to talk as much as Richard is. But I am Taylor LaBresh. I am the host of the Game Closet podcast, now on the Stop Hack and Roll podcast network. We are an informal chat show where we talk to all sorts of amazing queer and LGBT plus tabletop role players, game designers, podcasters, streamers, archivists. I always throw the archivists part in there because I think that's really cool. I also design games, which you can find at riverhousegames.itch.io. Right now, and if this episode is releasing before the end of Metatopia 2019, you can get all of my games half off, or you can get all of them in one bundle for only $20. Ooh. Right now, that's 9 games, and it's 59% off. There will be more.
Nice. Very cool.
And I have to strongly recommend Game Closet, not just because I was on it, but like, it's so good. And that show has made me cry so many times. It's just, it's a really good show.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
And also I was on it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into this. And we will start by discussing what this game is all about.
What's in a game?
What's in a game?
Very nice.
Since this is a new game, can you give us a quick pitch for the game and talk about the genre, the setting, etc.?
Oh, Taylor, I think this is all you.
Descent into Midnight is an underwater alien powered by the apocalypse game, exploring the depths of the sentient mind. What that essentially means is we are going to be playing strange underwater creatures in a world where humanity has never existed. We're going to tell emotional stories about community, togetherness, and the fight against corruption. Along the way, we're going to figure out what's important to ourselves, and we are going to try and really tap into empathy, community building, and trying to find the root of our identities. It's a really fun game that gets really deep, pardon the pun there, into like a lot of really cool stuff. I love it. It's one of my favorite role-playing games, which is great because I'm designing it. So like it helps.
I mean,
helps that I love it.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for me not to spend this whole time being like, this is the best game ever. But it is. And I've played it 3 times now. And I've made a point now to make it the first thing I do at a convention, because so far my conventions have gone quite well after playing it. And it just like it so far has set such a tone and like such a high mark for everything else to meet. But like, every time I've played it has been so emotional and so memorable, and like it just, everything's good. It's very good. It's just really good.
Yeah.
This is going to be a very good recording because it's just going to be a lot of really nice words, and I'm going to just blush a lot.
Yes.
I said that's what Alex Roberts said when she came on our show too. She's like, "Oh, this is really fun. I can just sit here and you say nice things at me."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a
really
very good.
This is the first Powered by the Apocalypse game I've ever played that wasn't my own game.
Right.
And this is the game that made me get Powered by the Apocalypse, and also was the quintessential piece of information that I was missing that helped me completely redesign the game that I'm working on.
Oh my God.
That was so cool. Like sitting and talking with you about Chimera, because it was just like, you know, because I think like you were one of the first people I saw in the hotel at a catacomb, right? And we were just kind of like, I'm like, I recognize this person from the interwebs.
Yep.
And we got to talking and then got to play test your game, and like it was great. Mm-hmm. And like seeing it come along and like the weird thing for me is that like this was basically my first attempt at a like any sort of game design thing. And, you know, coming from a background of all D20 and hard sci-fi and this and that and the other, it was just like gonna go out on a limb, and then like just to have that immediate feedback of like, hey, this had an impact on somebody else, like in the way that it was like changing my thinking too, was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think now that I'm thinking about it, this is the first PbtA game I played too. I think right after the first time I played this, the very next thing I did was to go and play Masks. But this was the first one. I'd never played a PbtA game before. We talked about them on the show, but not actually touched them.
We owe a lot to Masks, I guess, in terms of like game design genealogy. A lot of the mechanics are based around the sort of like emotional storytelling that Masks does. So all of the stats that you'll be rolling, if folks are not familiar with Powered by the Apocalypse games, the core crux of the game design is to do something, you do it. And occasionally you might bump into mechanics. Those mechanics are called moves. So you'll have triggers like when you spend downtime tending to your garden, or when you give in to violence. These are things that have to happen in the story for your moves to happen. And then when your moves do happen, you roll 2 6-sided dice and you apply bonuses. Sometimes those bonuses come from your stats. Unlike some games, we don't have stats that are intrinsic, like facts about you. I get really frustrated with games that are like, you are this many points of strong. But what I do really love is games that that have your emotional stakes tied into the mechanics, or like a narrative positioning. I think one of the coolest games out there right now is Brandon Leon Gambetta's Pasión de las Pasiones, which is a Powered by the Apocalypse game that rolls with questions that you answer. And that serves 2 purposes. The first is it means that you are leaning in as hard as you possibly can to the genre, because all of those questions are genre beats. And then the second, it encourages you to make sure that you are using the right move, because if you are looking at the move that you're trying to do and you can't answer yes to all, like a lot of those questions, like maybe this isn't the right thing for you to do right now. And you could take a step back and look at the story and say, what is the right thing? It's a very roundabout way of saying we owe a lot to Masks. So I'm very happy that you played this game and then were inspired to go play that game.
Well, and also, you know, like looking at what Rich loves, it's no surprise that, you know, he was down to get some Masks action going in there because he's Mr. Young Justice, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Young Justice.
And I think that this game appeals to me because of those really strong emotional story beats, that those are things that I really like in games, is just like, I mean, just being absolutely devastated. I'm trying to remember, we did in the Secret Archive, my friend Jude and I did a GenCon wrap up, and we were talking about our game, and we were both like, I don't know, it's like that horrible feeling in the pit of your stomach, that like nervousness, and like, but like in a good way. I was like, I don't know how to describe it. It's underwater fish horror. I don't know. But like so emotional. And it was just like every time I've walked away being like, holy crap. Like it feels really weird to be like, oh, I feel changed or like different. But like I mean, it has reframed how I play a lot of games. This is the first time that I experienced collaborative world building, for example, because I've played a lot more like crunchy systems. And this is just because it's really good. It's just really good. I have so many sound bites of me just, it's really good.
We're going to need a supercut of that for the Kickstarter, please.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can all set it as your ringtone. It's just really good.
Yeah. Yes.
You're doing cool stuff. Okay, so now we can get back on track with all of us, you know, now that we've gotten out of the way, the part where we just tell you how great you are. We can move on to the next section of the episode.
Wait, that's over? That's done? There's no more?
We'll come back to it. It's like 3 or 4 times in the outline. Don't worry about it.
Okay, I was going to say I'm going to quit this podcast.
So the next question we like to ask is, what sort of things do you need to play the game? If somebody wants to sit down and try out this game, what kind of stuff do they need to have in front of them?
Well, they're going to need a playbook, which again, we have the playtest version of those available on the website at descendintomidnight.com. But also you'll want a writing utensil and 2 6-sided dice. And that's pretty much it. You also need, you know, some move sheets for reference, and the guide will want a sheet to take notes on both the sanctuary that you build together and all of the world building stuff that you do together as well.
one thing that we have actually added for this recent build that's on the website, descentintomidnight.com, is
what was that website again?
Sheet. It's descentintomidnight.com, and I'm very glad that you asked. So we have playbooks for all of our characters, but we also have actually just recently added a community playbook as well. And that's something that I'm particularly proud of because it came out of a lot of playtests at Metatopia this year. And it was a very like spontaneous crystallization of, oh, here's what this game needs right now in this moment. And so that is something that is really, I don't know if it's necessary, but it's very integral to what I think is like the ideal play of this game, is being able to visually represent the community that you exist in, as well as the harmony and the corruption that bless and beset your community. So as you play, you are drawing on your community, you are defining things, you are creating a physical representation of this world that you're building and the magic that lies in it. And then you have tokens that as you progress through the game, you'll be interacting with 2 trackers on your character sheet, harmony and corruption. I'm sure that we have enough social connotations that you can tell which one's good and which one's bad. But as those progress on your character sheet, you will be actually putting tokens into the world to represent the effect that your characters are having. And that community playbook is something that has really, really tied everything together as a way of saying, like, this is a real thing.
Nice.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to try that out too. I'm signed up to play a game at GenCon with Jude again, so I'm hoping that he doesn't try and destroy the world again, because that seems to be his jam.
I mean, but like, you know, it's a good trick.
It is, but he's done it in every game we've played. I'm really excited to try it out now that you have this in there, because I think I want to ask about that, because I mean, and probably this is a question in our discussion section for later, but I'm going to ask it now because I want to. What does it feel like to have those kinds of like aha moments where you're sitting down, you're like, this is the thing that finally clicked into place? Like,
I think early on, I had one of those moments with the like meditation, the guided meditation, where, you know, this idea of we want to bring people together into a space where they can, you know, communicate effectively with each other. We can sort of lower those barriers between each other and those emotions and kind of explore those things. How do we get into a headspace to do that? And I went, oh, wait, I did something like that a couple of months ago at this, you know, this taiko drumming class. And I was like, hey, that's actually a really cool technique, you know, and I'm sure that there are other games that have done that before. I wasn't necessarily aware of any, but like it turned out to be a really cool thing, because it was like, oh, it brought a lot of things together for like, how do you enter that like play space, and how do you exit it as well, because it sort of gave it a framework for like, okay, you all sort of like take a deep breath and sort of describe where your character's headspace is at the beginning of the session, and then you do the same at the end, and you get to like have that reflection of like, how did my character change, and like, how did this affect them, which is something that like you're just not gonna get in a lot of games. And then, you know, like Taylor, I remember, was it at a catacon where you were trying the token thing and you were telling me about that? Like, that was really cool. Like that moment of just being there and talking with you, of like seeing that excitement of like the thing that you were going to do, you know?
Yeah. Cause that was literally the next weekend after I had like done it at Metatopia. So I was still like buzzing. And like that aha moment power is one of my favorite feelings in the entire world. And it's the reason why I've written 20 games, is that like when that inspiration hits you, like you can't do anything else but work on the thing that you love and the thing that is stuck in your head, like right there. And you know, it's like, maybe it's something that I love, and maybe this is a weird thing to say. It's something that I love about my bipolar depression is like my manic phases, my phases where I'm like on the upswing in high tide, and like I feel like I can fight the sun, and then like I'll get this idea, and I just like every cell in my body screams to like put it out into the world. And it's so euphoric, and it makes me so happy and fulfilled. So when that happened, I was like riding a super, super, super high tide.
I have to say that's like, how Character Evolution Cast happened. It's the first time that I like recognized that it was a manic episode. But I mean, poor Ryan was getting like a text message every like 20 minutes. And I was like, what if we did this? And we had a show and it was about this. And it was like too late. I've already emailed James D'Amato and asked him to come on our show that I just made up right now. Like, because you have this like, it's not healthy and you should probably medicate it. And I do. But those when if it's a thing that you have to live with, it's nice when you can channel that energy into something, and it feels so good when you can like put it into something that feels like creatively empowering too, because you're like, I have used this, I have made something tangible and it's out in the world, and then you get that feedback from people too of like, hey, this thing was cool. It feels really good.
Yeah. And like, I'm sure Richard could attest to this. There have been like nights at 3 a.m. where I'll just put into our group chat like, hey guys, just added 3 pages to the group doc.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I feel bad for people sometimes that are collaborating with me on things, because I'm like, here's everything all at once. Let me just vomit ideas on you. And sometimes they're good.
It's really, yeah. I mean, it's been really cool though to like watch Taylor's process, and I know, I feel like we have sort of arranged our trio into sort of a weird, like, I feel like we're on a scale of like, Rich is the like hard sci-fi-ish-y thing, like, and the PR person. Taylor has got the like the poetry in rules like somehow mashed together beautifully, and I'm sort of like sitting here in the middle going, oh, okay, yeah, I can pull some of these things together, and like, Rich has got his things that he does, and he'll like have his spurt of he's going to do a bunch of stuff. And then, Taylor like just knocks stuff out of the park, left and right. And like, yeah, I love working with these people. Like,
so I want to ask about that too. I mean, sorry, Ryan, I'm just crushing our outline. It's fine. We'll just do all of it now.
That's fine.
How does it feel to, I mean, and particularly Taylor, especially because you do a lot of game design, what is the big difference in collaborating with other people versus doing it on your own? Because I know for me, like when I've just started to dip my toes into it, I don't know that I could do it without collaborating with somebody else, because I need that like back and forth to bounce ideas off of. But I'm sure that it complicates things too, because you don't always have the same idea of what things should look like.
Yeah. This might be an ugly answer, but like sometimes it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Because I'll have a very strong idea of like, I know this like my heart says this song is true, and like and then you'll put it in there and it will be not what someone else's heart says the song is true. And trying to like reconcile those two harmonies together is difficult. Like I'll use an example of like our violence move, Unleash. We had many talks about that one specific move and the build of it. And even now it's still the only move in Descent into Midnight that works how it does, because it rolls with questions. And I don't think that the three of us will ever reach a point where we are all three happy with it.
Yeah.
And that's fine with me.
And like,
that has been the big lesson of game design, is that like sometimes you don't have to be overly joyous about your game. You just have to recognize that like there are parts of it that mean more to other people, just as there are parts that mean more to you. And finding that balance of saying like, hey, I really want to make this part mine, and I can see the love and support that you have for this other part over here. So let's find compromises that make us at least like decently happy with it.
Yeah. And I know, if we were doing this with people that we didn't respect as much as I think we do, like it would be a lot harder. you know, like from where I'm sitting, I'm sort of like in the middle of things, as far as like, you know, crunch and, sort of a narrative tone and all that. But so I think somewhere between, you know, Rich and you, Taylor. And I think like you said, we have had long and many conversations about different parts of the game. And I think, you know, there, like you said, like there are things that just like are never going to be exactly what all of us want. But I think it's been just a great learning experience of like how to sort of know when to go, is this good enough? And like when to push and when not to push. And just to like, sometimes you go, you know what, like, I love this thing that we're creating together and I love, you know, like you too. And sometimes that has to be enough to be like, okay, like we're making this thing together and it's not going to be exactly what we want in every place, but like as a whole, it's a thing that does a beautiful thing. And it like, it's a thing that we have done together and that's really cool. And you appreciate that too, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. For myself, I came from designing Chimera myself, just 100% solo. And it quickly became something that was too big for just me. And that's when I pulled in Amaraz to co-design with me because I didn't have the technical handling of the GM's tools or certain other aspects of Powered by the Apocalypse, and not having that person to kind of play off of in real time, pretty much any time that we were designing, was difficult. So as soon as we added, as soon as Amaraz joined my team, then we were able to kind of work off of each other and progress just skyrocketed.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value to that back and forth, that and different perspectives too, because different people are good at different things. And but I think I can definitely see, even in my own experience, how it does complicate things sometimes, because you're like, no, I need you to, I just need you to understand this. Will you just shut up for a minute and like let me tell you how it is? And it, especially when it's something creative, because you're like pouring your soul into it. It's really hard to have somebody say, I don't really love it. Like, I don't think that doesn't feel good.
I don't think I've had that experience yet.
Oh, you'll get there.
Probably. I guarantee it's going to be coming.
I was going to say, you will.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting.
I think, I think like one of the lessons though that came out of it for me is, you know, I love this game, right? Like it does amazing things. And I have loved working with Rich and Taylor. But I think like it's important to like start the work with people that you respect and that you love, because it's like, it's going to be hard at times, you know? And I don't know, I feel like I am closer to both Rich and Taylor after having gone through those experiences and having those conversations and like, you know, working through those difficult things. And like, I wouldn't trade that for, you know, having put out a game myself, you know, a year ago, you know?
Absolutely.
I feel like I was maybe a little bit too harsh when I said what I said there. Like, I also really think that like, this is not a game that I could have made by myself. And like, it is a game which is so much infinitely better by having other people read my words and say like, this doesn't actually mean anything. It's just a bunch of words that like sound nice next to each other. So can we actually make this move do something? Yeah,
I mean, the editing process is important in any kind of writing or creation. And I think the nice thing about having people that you collaborate with is that they can, in a lot of cases, be real-time editors for you and say, I don't understand. And Rich has been really cool
about saying like, hey, this is the direction where I'm like, this is my idea for something. I feel really strongly about like this flavor tone, like this playbook. Like he wrote the new 3 that we have. Yeah, it's been really, really cool. And Richard's like, I still think that the coolest thing that has ever, like, the coolest innovation about this game still comes from Richard's, like, hey, what if we just had, like, a guided meditation to start the game? And I was like, yeah.
And that's so cool because it's, like, not really even a mechanic so much as, like, let's sit down and set the tone for what we want. I really like those kinds of experiences that that acknowledge the fact that this is happening in the real world, you know? So like I love immersion and I love being in the game, but I also think it's important to acknowledge that we are all people sitting around a table, right? And so I like those things that can kind of mesh that together, and by acknowledging that you're at the table, like improving the experience in the game.
Well, and like, I have always been one of those people who, like, you know, I will see the articles about like, oh, here's all the cool stuff you can do to, you know, like turn your, you know, craft room into a dungeon and have, you know, like decorations and have candles and mood music and playlists. And I'm like, that is all a hell of a lot of work. But you know what I can do is take 3 minutes to say, okay, we are going to do this thing together. Let's take this like little bit of time to say this is a, like, you know, I hesitate to say like a sacred space, but like it's a special space. Yeah, exactly. It's like you create like a special like atmosphere. And I think, you know, Rich can speak more to the spirituality of it, but like, you know, to say like, this is the thing that we are going to do, and this is something we are going to do together, and we will, at the end of this, we will come back together to experience this journey, like together, reflect on it. And like, it makes such a huge difference, because it's like, how many one-shots of D&D have you walked away and gone, hey, that was really funny when the goblin did X, you know, and you're like, that was cool, you know, but like, you don't think about like, oh, well, did my character have an experience that changed them? And like, by doing that, you're sort of echoing the thing that you're doing for yourself, is like, how did this experience change me? And I think that's one of the big mechanisms that like makes it feel so powerful, is you actually spend a little bit of time and effort to think about it. And it forces you to do that.
I think it's especially important in a game that has the tendency to get really emotional, because you sort of need to have that shared space with the people around you to say like, and especially in a one shot at something like a convention, or, you know, where you don't necessarily know the people around you always, that to have that moment of like, okay, we are going to have this coming together kind of a thing, to recognize that we are all about to have a shared experience. And it's important to like acknowledge the fact that this might be uncomfortable, but we're okay with each other and all that kind of stuff, because it can be really overpowering sometimes.
It's so strange to play this kind of game, especially with strangers, because like in my head before this, gaming was, yeah, we're going to sit down and, you know, go kill some goblins or blow up some big giant robots. And like, you know, I could be playing a video game and doing the same thing. This is just doing that at a table with some friends or whatever, you know, and it's like, I can go to any con anywhere and be like, hey, look, there's an open seat at the table. Let's sit down. Let's roll some dice. Let's kill some stuff. Yeah. You know, and
that's a difference that like, I know they talk about developmentally in kids, the idea of playing together versus playing next to each other. And I think that at a lot of conventions, and even, you know, even in some kinds of games where you're not necessarily like engaging in that way, that there's the tendency to feel like you are playing next to each other. Like, this is my character, and my character's doing the thing, and your character's doing the thing, but like, we're not doing it together. And so I think for me, I prefer games where you are playing together versus playing next to each other.
Yeah, I really love how this game kind of puts front and center bringing people together to help bring a community together to face off against this thing. But it was also created by a micro community of developers as well. So like everything is around people coming together to create something amazing, from the development down to the stories that are being told.
And we're going there for fulfillment too. You know, it's like we're finding people who, you know, can do the layout and the art and all these things that like we want to get, like we want to do this together as a group, and like, you know, get everybody a little bit of work and make this cool thing, and, you know, like produce a thing together. I'm super excited to have a physical book in the real world that I can point to and go, I made this thing with these really cool people, you know? Yeah.
Well, and I think, I mean, in talking about like building it as part of a community, like you guys had Devin George do some of the art for it. And I think, I mean, if I remember correctly, like Devin and I were in the game at a Catacon together. And I think that that decision developed from the fact that we were all sitting around and Devin's over there like doodling our characters. And it was like, oh she's very good.
So I think somebody had mentioned that Devin was an artist, but that was after the conversation that Taylor and I had where, you know, he had come up with the idea for doing this map and then trying it out and like had reminded me about it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. I have to remember to do that. And so if I remember right, at the table, I was like, hey, Devin, you're an artist. Do you want to just like, you know, sketch something to be like to visualize what we're talking about as we were doing the world building portion? And then all of a sudden at the end of the game, we look over and there's this like crab creature thing that was basically the thumbnail for the sketch that's now on, I think, the Cultivator playbook, like this amazing art. And like, and it all sort of like fell into place where it's like, you know, Taylor had this great idea for, you know, the community playbook and the map. And then that led into that experience in that game. And then like bring it up as, oh, we should visualize this. And then like, going on from there, it's just,
and it's been so cool. Like, I mean, and she had sent me like one of the progress pics, like when we were recording for her episode, and it was just like, it's so cool. Like, oh, this is a game that I played and this is a world that we created, and now it's like part of the game. Now it's in there. Like that feels amazing.
Yeah.
So speaking of this world, getting us a little bit back on track for our outline.
show.
We just answered like, I mean, the thing is, we've answered like the whole next question.
I know, right?
I mean,
so
basically.
yeah, what do characters do in this game effectively?
I mean, the players cry sometimes, but
the characters, not the
characters. Yes. I mean, like the sort of central. It's not really a villain of the game, but the antagonist, right? Is this corruption? So corruption with a capital C. And we basically designed it to be something that is some sort of existential threat to the community. Now in my games, because of just my gaming background, I typically go towards, especially for one shots, we build the city together and usually there's something spooky or weird or interesting. And that's where the big giant goo monster is going to come from. You know, where it is sort of a physical manifestation of corruption that may be coming out of the echo or something like that. But it really can be a lot of different things. I know in one of the very first games Taylor ran, it was basically this like bleaching where it was just killing things off mysteriously. And it can be, you know, also like, you know, emotional disconnects between people in the community, right? Like maybe it's just you know, discord or you know, people not talking to each other, or like corruption, like you might think of, you know, in just like society at large, of like, you know, people being selfish or looking out for themselves. And so the player characters are a team of psionically gifted guardians who are protecting their city or their reef or their community against that in whatever form it takes.
And I think every time I've played it, that corruption has been so vastly different, because it obviously gets defined. We haven't talked about that yet, but it gets defined by the people at the table. And so it's always fascinating to see what people come up with. It's been, I want to say in one game, it was like that just like new children weren't being born, and there were like the moons or whatever, right? And one of them was dark.
Yes.
And yeah,
there was a void in the echo that wanted to gain sentience, and the spirit following Jude's character, who was like a seal or something around, like sacrificed itself to give this void creature sentience, I think was the finale of that game.
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. He just like let the corruption eat his own sentience or something. It was very weird. There was another one where he was like talking to this like ancient being through the echo, and we were like, don't do that. And he's like, it's probably fine. It was not fine. So.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that I think is it in a nutshell. Like bare bones, the characters, you know, we want the characters to come together to overcome some sort of corruption to make their community better. Along the way, that becomes much and like more of a complicated thing to do. As you engage with corruption, you take it into yourself. You know, our characters will become corrupted or affected by the corruption, which means that their community is going to become corrupted and affected by the corruption. And there's fallout for that. One of the things that we really always encourage the guide, who is our GM or facilitator of the game, to do is to ask, so how do you feel about that? And try and push things through from a feeling rather than an action standpoint. And so I guess Richard is very good at like being like upfront and succinct with his games and like, hey, here's the story, here's what we're doing, and I love it. And I'm over here like, yeah, what if we just didn't have a story, but just like all felt different things at different times?
I have to say, though, that like playing with Richard, at one point, he literally like leaned back and put his hands behind his head and just watched us ruin things for ourselves.
It was amazing.
Because we just like kept making things worse. And he's just like, I'm just watching this happen.
Well, and I think that there's a phenomenon that's happening with our playtests and with the con games that we've run, which is that if you have a short game of Descent into Midnight, a lot of bad things happen.
Yes.
And if you play multiple games of Descent into Midnight, a lot of bad things happen, and then you fix a lot of them.
Yeah.
And you come together and you find that synthesis between all of the characters playing, and it ends up in a really harmonious place. But because we're all doing these con one-shots and like playtest one-shots, it's just like the game is getting this reputation of this like emotional heart wrecker, like destruction wrecking ball of a game. And it's like, yeah, it could do that, but like, God, imagine the positive emotions too.
There is hope in there somewhere. Just have to stick it out for a minute.
And I think, you know, like you said, like with a one shot, it's very like, okay, we've just spent 30, 40 minutes building characters in a world or whatever. Okay, we've got an hour and a half to fill. Let's do the thing. What's the obvious thing? This is the corruption. Let's go. Where like, you know, the things that people build are beautiful, right? Like, and I think that's one of the things that really is the strength of the game, is that like the cities and the communities that are built up to have these issues are just amazing. And like there is always some nugget of just like of the like beauty and wonder of life and the ocean and connection with the community. But like you said, it's like in a one shot, it's let's take a wrecking ball to it to hit those emotions hard, you know. And like you end it and you go, okay, you can see where their corruption is coming and we've all felt these things, but you're like, you're at that point where it's like, this is the part in the story where it's like, okay, the thing has happened. And in a novel, the next part would be like dealing with the consequences of that and coming together and building up until you can face the next challenge together, you know? Yeah, like I think it'll be really interesting to hear from people as they play longer games, like how that sort of balances out. And I know we've talked a lot about the corruption, but I know Taylor mentioned the harmony mechanic. And so like as your characters are encountering the corruption and all these things, they're gaining corruption and it's, you know, bleeding out into the community and everything. But also as your characters learn and come together to face it, they're building harmony with each other and also with the community. And there are these tokens that, you know, you can place on the map to represent like the community healing and coming together and how you're addressing the corruption. And I think that's an important part that, again, like you don't get as much of in that shorter time slot.
Yeah, I really am looking forward to hopefully at some point being able to play like a campaign of it, because I want to see how all of that plays out and like how, you know, if you deal with this horrible corruption and, you know, like how you're changed after that and how that affects things moving forward, because that's always fascinating to me too.
Yeah.
I think that we can skip the next several questions because I think that we've gone into it.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. Basic terms and concepts. We've talked about what Powered by the Apocalypse is. We've talked a little bit about moves and playbooks. Is there anything else that you think people might need to know as we go into character creation?
Conditions are something that we have not talked about.
Yes, let's talk about them.
So all of our stats are emotions or emotions, ideals, like things that are important to you. So they are like hope, community, altruism, drive, and calm. And as as the story does bad things to you, we'll put it that way politely. The story does bad things to you. You may take conditions which don't represent necessarily your character becoming like physically harmed, but the important like struggle that we want to tell stories about is our like struggle with emotions. And so instead of like hit points or harm or clocks or whatever, we have our conditions, which you will mark against your stats. So each stat has a condition that coincides with it. Things like isolated, conflicted,
selfish, angry.
Thank you.
Despairing. Yeah. Those are the other ones.
Yeah. And these impact the numbers side of things, but they also are supposed to be like role-playing prompts for you. So if you are angry, like what does that make you feel? How do you feel in this situation since you are angry? If your friends are trying to like rally about the people, how do you feel if you are conflicted? What do you do in this situation? So conditions are a nice way of kind of not necessarily engaging with our harmony corruption mechanic, because sometimes there might be harm that is outside of those two extremes, but like how do you represent that and have a role-playing thrust to it?
And it's also really nice to have those marked when you're going into like the first, like if it's a multiple session thing, when you start out that second or third session, it's like you can look and go, oh yeah, these are the things that, my character was struggling with at this point. And then you can reflect that in the sanctuary as you describe it, in that guided meditation, or at the end of a session, you can go, oh, how is my character feeling at this point compared to when we started? And you have that as like a reference point, in a brief, sort of easy to track and remember kind of way.
Oh, very cool.
Should we get into the fun part?
I mean,
are we ready?
There's a part that's more fun than this.
Well, I mean, in this next part, I will continue to tell you how much I like this game. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, then I think we're set.
Awesome.
All right.
Let's make some people.
Let's make some people.
Oh, and a community.
And a community. So normally we like to let our guests go first. Is there a playbook that either of you would be particularly interested in?
I mean, I was thinking the Redeemed. It was one of the earliest playbooks, and I think has seen some of the most change, I think, from the very beginning. It was originally called The Living Weapon, which there's a whole story about that like kind of ties into the way that we treat violence in the game, where we found that people were focusing on that, like, oh, this is the fighter, or this is the one that, is the tank, or what have you. When really what we wanted the story to be about was the choice not to use violence or the consequences thereof, or, having the capability to do that. Like this is something that hit home for me. I was always a very big guy. And like I had it was like third grade or something. I had a friend of mine, and I hurt him on purpose. It wasn't anything serious or anything, but it was just like, I remember that years later, 30 years later, because like I took advantage of the fact that like I was bigger than my friend, I forget what it was even about, but and it was like, I remember that. And I'm like, that feeling of, I had the capacity for violence and I did violence, and I still regret that, and it's about that story of like, okay, how do you deal with that, knowing that you are capable of that. And, in the case of the Redeemed, the story of that character is, you were created to excel at conflict. And it's the story of like how you reject that essentially.
Very cool.
Okay, I'm not crying. It's fine. We haven't even started yet.
Yeah.
Okay. It's fine. It's fine. Taylor, you talk now. It's very bossy. I'm sorry. You talk now.
I'm not going to do something that like emotional, but I think I'd like to be the Seeker, because we have the one thing that we haven't really talked about in the setting of Descent into Midnight is the Echo, which is just like the Corruption, different for every like game and world that we are going to be playing in. It is, to me, it's like the world behind worlds. It's what you see when you echolocate. It is the impressions that the idea of things leave in your existence. And there's really cool like existential storylines that you can tell in the Echo, especially when you try to balance like harmony and corruption. And the Seeker is really about kind of navigating the bubble between those worlds. So if you think about the like Plato's allegory of the cave, the Seeker might be the person passing the torch by the mouth of the cave. They are the very few folks have, you know, as deep a connection to the Echo as the Seeker does, although everyone can engage with it in some way, shape, or form. They are the ones who live in it. So I really am thinking about this character as a very surreal, existential, like abstract character.
And like, again, like going back to designing this as a team, like it's really cool seeing the different interpretations of the Echo at each of our tables. Because, for Rich, it's like, it can, how does he describe it? It's like, if the physical world is, the tip of the iceberg, the Echo is the ocean that it floats in, you can look at it as, it's another plane of existence. It can be many things. And I think, again, like the Corruption, its strength lies in that, whatever bonkers idea you come to the table with, and create together, there's always room to tell whatever kind of story will, hit those buttons for you emotionally, and sort of like bring the group together. And it's always different.
All right. How about you, Amelia?
Oh gosh. I'm thinking about doing the Empath.
Nice.
It's one that seems super interesting to me, and I have not gotten to play yet. So, it's all about, like channeling emotions and, this one in particular, don't you like absorb the corruption from other people?
Yeah.
So the Empath deals with corruption in some different ways than other playbooks. So for starters, they have a corruption track that's just longer than everyone else's. They can take more of it into themselves. And I am scrolling to them.
Yeah. I mean, if I remember correctly, that was the very first playbook that
the absolute first one ever written.
And again, like watching these playbooks evolve has been really cool. If I recall, Rich had this idea for like sort of an aquatic monk healer type character that, he tried to explore in various systems and, doing like supplements for D&D, and had this idea for, this is kind of what this character type is like. And then watching that evolve into this, at one point there was it was like, they were characterized as like an emotional vampire, I think, where it's like, if you use it for good, you can like, you can heal people by taking some of that burden away from other people and using it to power, your powers to help other people. But if you go too far, what does that look like? There's a lot of really interesting things you can do with the story of that playbook.
I want to tell you and other people about, my first game I played with, Aaron Amendola, and he played the Empath. And it stuck with me. It was phenomenal. Basically, his character was like a therapist. And essentially, his whole job was to sit and listen to the problems of other people, but would basically like absorb the emotions of other people. But part of his character story was that because of that, like he would reflect to them, like what they looked like and everything is like a comfort thing. But part of that was over time, he had completely forgotten what he looked like and how he felt about things and his own memories because he had spent so much time absorbing things from other people. And it was just like fascinating to me. It was like, that's so cool and interesting and sad. Ryan, what do you think?
I think I'm going to go a little against type here and go with the specialist.
Ooh, very cool.
Specialist looks like they're an expert at getting people into and out of danger or questionable situations. And it looks like they're kind of what like the strike task force of the characters.
Yeah, Richard talked about like rescue personnel, the special forces, if hesitate to call it that, but like
don't get me started on my anthropomorphism speech, Richard.
But like like you
what does it mean that our world has forces, and what does it mean that they're special?
Yes.
What does anything mean, Taylor?
Not good things.
Yes. Well, I know one of the early playtests ended up sort of turning into a weird like Shadowrun thing of like, a character was grown in a lab and we were going to, take down the break into the corporate arcology or whatever underwater and do a thing. And it was like, what does corporate security look like? I guess it's a giant shark, like it's evolved from there a little bit, but yeah.
I don't like this underwater capitalism.
No, it's real bad.
It's just very soggy.
Paper money is the worst.
Capitalism's already bad enough without being soggy. All right, so from here, what do we do?
So once you've chosen your playbooks, take a read of their flavor text. You can even read it out loud at the table. Take a look at your picture. You are not beholden to the art that is on your playbook. And I want to drive that home here. A lot of people have really taken the idea of their character and run hog wild with it. We don't put a limit on like what your character is or could look like or do anything. So we have had games where, and I like to joke and say this is like the quintessential Descent into Midnight party is like one person plays an octopus, like they are an 8-legged cephalopod, like pulled out of Earth's ocean. And they are playing that octopus because they love octopi and they are filled with knowledge about octopi that, shocks and awes the table and it's great. And we have like 2 people that are playing some weird animal hybrids. They're like really excited about like different concepts that they're mashing up together, and that's phenomenal. And then we have one person who like usually they go last.
Taylor,
when they tell, oh no, I'm being called out. Usually it's like the last person to talk about their character, and this is like someone who has just taken like the idea of what a character looks like and just tossed it out the window and said, I'm playing the concept of echolocation, or I am playing the interconnectedness of all living things. Like I am playing someone for whom maybe a physical body isn't necessary, or like stretching the idea of what a character can be. Like I am playing the turtle on whose back our community grows.
Yes.
I played a rock last time.
There's always one.
There is always one, and I love it.
It's great.
Yeah.
That's because I'm biased.
Yeah, my last character was like that. Like the organic matter that came out of the hydrothermal vents is where my consciousness was allowed to flow between.
Yeah. So I bring that up because the next thing that we're going to do is choose what our character might look like. So there are 3 sets of alliterative descriptions. So for example, the Seeker has 3 pairs of words. I could be gelatinous and genial, sharp and shielded, monstrous and majestic. And I think I am going to be gelatinous and genial because I'm going to be playing the gelatin membrane between our world and the Echo.
Like I said, there's always one.
Yep. There's always one.
And it's wonderful. Gosh. So as the redeemed, I've got the choice of colony of creatures, polished predator, mailed monstrosity, or deceptively delicate. And in this case, I think I am going to go with mailed monstrosity. So I can't remember if it was the very last game I played or the game before, but we had this idea of what does a computer network look like, or what is sort of the equivalent for like storing and disseminating information, and it was sort of like bivalves and clams and all that. So I've got this idea of this is a creature who lives half in the echo and half in the physical world, and their tether to the physical world are discarded bits of organic matter, and for whatever reason, the bits of organic matter that they latch onto the best are the shells of dead computer clams, or whatever we want to call them. So they're like the psionic biotech equivalent of a circuit golem that hangs out in the next dimension and just sort of happens to have those shells be its body in the physical world.
Nice.
And that is definitely mailed monstrosity, because all those shells just sort of floating around.
All right, I kind of got my concept.
Go for it. I'm still trying to...
Okay, for the specialist, between the looks, I have invisible and infinite, beefy and bulbous, or fluid and fastidious. I love all of these, but I'm going to go with invisible and infinite. And counter to Taylor's edges, fringes of the echo, I exist along all of the surfaces of the world, and I am there to amplify the echo for all of the living creatures in the world, so they have a better, more harmonious experience with the echo.
So you're a signal booster.
Effectively.
A living signal booster. That's really cool. All right, so no pressure, Amelia, but are we going to have a party that actually lives mostly in the echo?
I mean, I feel like y'all are just like, oh yeah, totally, here's everything, and I'm like, I want to go with live and lustrous. Oh man, I'm having a really hard time with this today.
Have you seen frilled sharks?
Ooh.
No, but I'm gonna Google that now.
Just a quick content warning for anyone trying to Google frilled sharks. They are terrifying.
Oh yeah, they're real scary.
Now I have to look for this. My goodness.
Yep. So do you remember that?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the naked mole rat of sharks, I would say.
It's like...
Oh, wait. This might not be exactly what I was thinking of.
Oh, so have any of you all ever seen that Red Sonja movie with Bridget Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No.
That's probably a good thing, but there's a monster in that is basically a giant version of one of these guys.
Oh, wait, it is. It's just the first, 3 rows of Google image searches are not as scary as they should be.
I mean, they're all pretty terrifying.
Yeah, I mean, as you get down, yep.
Oh, boy. That's,
What is this thing?
Oh, my God. Somebody made an origami one. Okay. Sorry. I'm going down the rabbit hole. I'll see you all in a couple hours.
All right. Let us know how it goes. I want to, because I'm stuck on this word lustrous, so I want something like iridescent. But I don't want to be a jellyfish.
Okay, I'm back. I'm going to be good. It's taking everything, but I will do it.
I believe in you.
Bookmarks. That's what those are for.
Yes.
I'm slowing it down. Oh.
Well, how abstract do you want to get?
Well, I mean, everybody else is pretty abstract.
I mean, I feel like you could be the one in the party too, where it's like, I'm a sea otter because they're friggin' cute.
I really want to be a clam of some sort. And yeah, with sort of a pearlescent outside.
Nice.
But also really sharp teeth. That's important.
Oh,
Nice.
yeah. A bitey clam.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to be, that's how we'll describe it. I am a live and lustrous bitey clam.
Love it.
Amazing.
So we've got one physical connection to the world.
And so we're back to there's always one.
Why do you got
Just the opposite.
and went last as well.
Symmetry in all things.
Thank you for joining us for part 1 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 2, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter at CreationCast or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can be found in the show notes. If you'd like to leave us a rating or review, we have links to various review platforms out there, including Apple Podcasts, in our show notes. Also, check the show notes for links to our other projects. Thanks for joining us, and remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We will see you next time.
Now we gotta read some show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Show blurbs.
Character Creation Cast is hosted by the One Shot Podcast Network. If you enjoyed our show, visit oneshotpodcast.com, where you'll find other great shows like A Woman with Hollow Eyes.
A Woman with Hollow Eyes is a podcast adaptation of One Shot's live-streamed dramatic Invisible Sun actual play. Discover a world of magic, secrets, and supernatural civic disputes in our unique take on Saturnine. In the first season, James D'Amato, Kat Cool, and SNL writer Alan Linick are led on a mind-bending adventure by GM Darcy Ross. Even if you already saw the streams, you want to listen to this podcast for the incredible soundtrack, composed and edited by Will Levendahl. Get it by searching for A Woman with Hollow Eyes or Darcy Ross on iTunes, Google Play, or your favorite podcast app.